Hey everybody, welcome back to the Bob Davis Podcast YouTube channel. I usually use shorts or longer form videos to let people know I've just put up an audio podcast on iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Audible, and so forth. And I'll tell you more about that at the end of the video. But I either use shorts or I do a little bit longer form videos to let people know that there's a new podcast up. And this video, I'm going to talk about podcast 1112, Mount Washington's Forgotten Radio History and why it is forgotten. Just came back down from a tremendous trip up to Mount Washington, which is a couple of hours north of here. And then there's a road that goes up there. We did not take the road. The road goes back to the 1860s. Obviously, it's paved most of the way. And I have a friend who has kind of a sports car, and he was worried about burning the brakes out on the way down. So we decided to take what's called the Cog Railway, which is actually a pretty significant industrial development for places like Switzerland and Norway and New Hampshire, where this peak is something like 6,300 feet up. You start from about 2,400, and you take this Cog Railway up the mountain. And what it is it's like a wheel that gets hold of the tracks or something and kind of pulls the train up the hill. And that's all in the podcast. I don't need to get into detail how it works, but it's kind of there's a whole bunch of evidence of extensive industrial and media entrepreneurship up on top of Mount Washington dating back to the 1850s. Which is pretty cool. You don't see that in the Midwest, and you don't see it in the West, generally speaking, unless it's Spanish territory back in the day. New Mexico, Arizona, Mexico, and so forth. The reason I'm doing the podcast is, I love all the history. I love all the stuff that people talk about when you get to see what was up there. There's a big pile of rocks that used to be a hotel. There's a ton of people who've died trying to get up there. I mean, it's a really cool place. It has a lot of history, but it also has a lot of radio history. And just briefly, the guy who invented FM radio put probably his second or third tower up there, and it constituted the first wireless radio network because he sent signals in FM to network affiliates. Major Armstrong built this great tower up there. If you saw me on Instagram, you saw the tower behind me. There is nothing up there that celebrates Armstrong's achievements. He was a giant and one of the founders of the radio industry in a big way, or any of the artifacts from the stuff that he worked with. No transmitters, no plaques. Really, there's one plaque in the Yankee building, which you'll hear all about. And I will say that the state of New Hampshire was very kind to us because they gave us a tour, and we had a great park ranger who is the site leader, the guy in charge of the Mount Washington site. He was great. All the people there were great. So I don't blame New Hampshire for this. I blame the radio industry for, I guess the way to phrase it would just be to say, I simply don't understand why the radio industry wouldn't have some kind of a monument up there to Major Armstrong. I'm a little bit harsher about it in the podcast. If you listen to the podcast at the BobDavisPodcast.com, as I said, Spotify, Google Play Music, or Google, what is it? Google Podcasts now. I always call it Google Play. And, Audible, and wherever you get your podcasts. And I think it's a testament to the sad and lonely reality that the radio industry has become, forcing so many of us into digital media. And I love what I'm doing. I love YouTube and I love podcasts and everything else. But after spending so many years in radio, you look at and you wonder why the industry can't gather the resources to underwrite some kind of a monument and museum up there. The Weather Service certainly has, and other former examples of successful entrepreneuring up on top of that mountain. Aside from that, it's just so cool up there. If you ever get the chance and you're in New Hampshire, I love New Hampshire. I really, really like being here. And I'm working on spending more time in individual places so I get to know it better. And so I'm at the end of the day, I will have spent about a month here, from way up north to way down south to Portsmouth, which is where I'm going to end up in a couple of weeks. And then I'm out of here. So, and I'll talk about I've got my new benchmark maps I'm pretty excited about. I'll talk about all that in future videos. So I'm trying to spend time in places to get to know people, especially in states, as I said, that I may not be as familiar with as I am when it comes to the Midwest, and it's getting to be also the Southwest. And it's interesting because for example, you think of Maine as a small state, but it's not. It's a very large place, and it's foreboding, and it has some of the roughest country in the world, and certainly Mount Washington has its share of lives being taken. I think something like half as many people who have died on Everest have died hiking up Mount Washington. So it's a pretty harsh environment. It's an Arctic environment at the very top, which means that you will not see that kind of weather until you go 800 miles north of Mount Washington to the Arctic zone, to the Arctic Circle, and you will see that kind of weather. That's how high it is, and that's how harsh the conditions are. So in that respect, it's amazing that people were able to build hotels up there and build the Cog Railway in the 1860s and so forth. And having said that, I think it's almost a fait accompli that someone like Armstrong would have chosen to build a radio tower up there as well, because you're more than 6,000 feet up. And especially for a radio network like his, which actually the Yankee network hired him to put this network together, and he suggested, why instead of wires, let's do it with FM radio, which in the 30s nobody had heard of. It was brand new, and there was a considerable amount of chicanery involved with Armstrong, and he really paid for it his whole life, and that's also in this podcast, with links in the blog at thebobdavispodcast.com, so you can learn a little bit more about the whole thing. But yeah, really amazing. And what a change. Here we are down here in Manchester, and the weather's beautiful. The leaves are starting to change. It's 90 degrees out here. Up on the mountain, it's like 35 with 30 to 40 mile an hour winds, maybe 40. And beautiful and sunny, but a rough environment indeed. So check out the podcast. I'll put links in the description box, and I will be doing more videos as I get ready to roll out of here and head west. Bye.